Not angrily, not cruelly, just efficiently. As if I were an item on a list they didn't have time to get to. "We're too busy, Mom. You'll figure it out. Handle it yourself." The words were said so casually that it took me a moment to realize what they meant. They weren't refusing to help, they were dismissing me, and that was the moment everything changed, though none of them noticed it yet. My name is Victoria Hale. I'm 71 years old, a widow. And until recently, a woman who believed that being patient and understanding would eventually be rewarded. I was wrong. If this story already feels familiar, pause for just a moment. Tell me in the comments which city or country you're listening from. And if stories about quiet strength and consequences that arrive without shouting resonate with you, make sure you're subscribed. Some lessons don't announce themselves, but they stay with you. This began 6 months after my husband, Edward Hale, passed away. Edward was not a loud man. He believed in preparation, in reading fine print, in doing things once and doing them properly. He handled our finances not because I couldn't, but because he liked order. He liked knowing where everything stood. When he died, the house became unbearably quiet. Not lonely in a dramatic way, just hollow. Grief didn't arrive as tears, it arrived as exhaustion, as fog, as days where even deciding what to eat felt like a burden. That was when my children started becoming busy. My eldest, Claire Reynolds, was always busy. Her career demanded it. Meetings, travel, responsibilities she wore like armor. She had a way of speaking that made decisions sound final before anyone else had a chance to weigh in. My son, Matthew Hale, framed everything in logic. Efficiency, practicality. If something didn't serve a clear purpose, it was unnecessary. Emotions to him were problems to be managed quickly. And Lydia, my youngest, quiet, observant, rarely confrontational. She benefited from decisions without ever wanting to be part of making them. At first, I didn't notice the shift. I assumed they were giving me space. Then came the phone calls that didn't get returned. The conversations cut short. The sighs when I tried to explain something more than once. The moment that sealed it came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had called because I needed help sorting through Edward's remaining paperwork. Nothing urgent, just overwhelming. I wanted someone to sit with me, maybe help me understand what still needed to be done. Claire answered first. "Mom, I'm heading into a meeting," she said. "Can this wait?" "It's about your father's documents," I replied. "I just need, email me," she said. "I'll look at it when I can." The line went dead. I called Matthew. "Mom, I really don't have the bandwidth for this," he said. "You've handled things before, you'll figure it out." Then Lydia, no answer. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, phone in my hand, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock Edward had fixed himself years ago. That was when the phrase finally landed. Handle it yourself, so I did. But not the way they expected. I stopped calling, stopped explaining, stopped asking. Instead, I called Samuel Porter. Samuel had been Edward's estate attorney for years. Calm, thorough. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. When I told him I wanted to review my documents, he didn't sound surprised. "Of course," he said. "Take your time, we'll do this carefully." We met 3 days later. I didn't cry, I didn't rant. I simply told him what had changed. "I want to make sure my wishes are clear," I said, "and protected." Samuel nodded. "Clarity prevents conflict." Over the next 2 weeks, we went through everything, slowly, deliberately. And quietly, I changed one document. No announcements. No family meeting, no warnings, life continued as usual on the surface. My children remained busy. Claire talked about projects. Matthew talked about efficiency. Lydia listened more than she spoke. And then, one afternoon, Elena Morales stopped by. My niece had always been different. She showed up without needing a reason, asked how I was without checking her phone. Brought soup once simply because she'd made too much. She didn't ask for anything. She never did. As she sat with me, listening, not fixing, not redirecting, I realized something that settled heavily in my chest. Care is not loud. Entitlement is. Weeks later, the messages began. Claire asked casually about the lake house. Matthew mentioned planning ahead. Lydia forwarded an article about simplifying estates. They were preparing, assuming, confident. And when they finally decided to show up together, expecting keys, expecting compliance, expecting me to fall back into place, I was ready. Because the document had already been changed. And waiting inside that house was not the mother they remembered. That was only the beginning. I didn't tell them I'd changed anything. That part mattered more than they realized. Silence, when chosen, has weight. And I let it sit between us like an unanswered question. After my meeting with Samuel Porter, life settled into a strange calm. The kind that feels artificial, like the quiet right before a storm you can sense but can't yet see. My children continued exactly as before, which is to say, they continued without me. Claire Reynolds called once every few weeks, always with purpose, never with curiosity. "How are you holding up?" she'd ask, already halfway through something else. Before I could answer fully, she'd pivot. "I've been thinking about the lake house," she said one afternoon, her tone measured. "It's a liability if it just sits there. We should probably discuss next steps soon." "We should, not you, not me, we," I simply replied, "I'll think about it." She seemed satisfied by that. Silence often gets mistaken for agreement. Matthew Hale preferred texts. Short. Efficient. "Hey mom, just checking in. Everything okay? Let me know if you need help with logistics." Logistics, as if grief were a shipment delayed at customs. And Lydia Hale, she hovered on the edges, liked posts. Forwarded articles. Occasionally sent messages that ended with question marks instead of opinions. "You doing all right? Saw this and thought of you. Let me know if you need anything." She never defined what anything meant. I stopped responding quickly, not to punish them, but to observe. What I noticed was this: when I didn't initiate, nothing happened. No visits, no concern, no space carved out. And yet interest began to build around one thing. The lake house? Edward loved that place. We bought it before the children were grown, before life became schedules and deadlines and distance. It was where time slowed down, where conversations lingered, where no one pretended to be too busy. It was also, inconveniently for them, valuable. The first coordinated message arrived in late spring. Claire created a group chat. "I think it's time we talk about the lake house as a family," she wrote. "We all have stakes here." Stakes, I read the word twice. Matthew responded almost immediately. "Agreed, makes sense to plan before things get complicated." Lydia added a simple thumbs-up emoji. No one asked what I wanted. They assumed my role was to listen. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Alina Morales. She answered on the second ring. "Hey Aunt Victoria," she said. "Are you okay?" I realized then how rarely anyone asked me that without an agenda attached. We talked about ordinary things, her work, a book she was reading, the way spring was arriving late this year. Then I told her carefully, "I've been doing some planning." She didn't interrupt, didn't probe, just listened. "I want you to know," I said, "that you matter to me, not because of what you do, but because of who you are." There was a pause on the line, emotional but restrained. "That means more than you know," she replied softly. After we hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, clarity. 2 weeks later, Samuel Porter called. "They've started making assumptions," he said calmly. "That's normal, they will escalate." "What should I do?" I asked. "Nothing," he replied. "Let them reveal themselves." They did. Claire suggested renovations before any ownership had changed. Matthew asked about access before any permission had been granted. Lydia asked whether we should streamline decision-making. They spoke as if the outcome were inevitable, as if I were already fading. Then came the message that changed everything. "We're planning to come up to the lake house next month," Claire wrote. "We'll need the keys." Not asking, telling, I stared at the screen for a long time, then I typed one sentence. "That won't be possible." The typing dots appeared immediately. "Claire, what do you mean?" "Matthew, why not?" "Lydia, is everything okay?" I put the phone down, and for the first time since Edward passed, I felt steady. They were about to discover something they'd never considered. That handle it yourself didn't mean do nothing. It meant do it quietly. And when they finally arrived, confident, demanding, certain, they wouldn't be walking into a negotiation. They'd be walking into consequences. They arrived exactly when they said they would. That alone told me everything. No call beforehand, no request, no hesitation, just certainty. The sound of tires crunching against gravel drifted through the open windows of the lake house late Saturday morning. I was standing in the kitchen holding a mug of tea I hadn't touched, watching sunlight move slowly across the wooden floor. I didn't rush. I had learned that urgency was something I no longer owed anyone. Through the front window, I saw them step out of their cars. Claire Reynolds first, sunglasses already on, phone in hand. She scanned the property like she was assessing a project, something to be managed. Matthew Hale followed, carrying a duffel bag like this was already his weekend. Calm, prepared, detached, Lydia Hale lingered behind them, adjusting her jacket, eyes moving quietly between her siblings and the house. She looked uneasy, but she didn't say anything. She never did. They walked up the porch steps together. Claire tried the handle. It didn't open. She frowned, tried again, knocked. "Mom," she called out, her voice polite but edged. "We're here." I waited until the knocking came again, louder this time. Then I opened the door. Claire's smile appeared immediately, controlled, public-facing. "There you are," she said lightly. "We thought maybe the lock was sticking." "No," I replied. "I changed it." That caught them off guard. Matthew's brow furrowed slightly. Lydia's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me. "You changed it?" Claire asked. "Why?" "Because I wanted to," I said calmly. They stepped inside anyway. Claire moved past me without waiting for permission, already surveying the space. Matthew set his bag down near the sofa. Lydia hovered near the door, uncertain. "This place really needs some updates," Claire said, gesturing toward the windows. "We were thinking—" "No," I interrupted. She turned sharply. "No," she repeated. "This isn't a planning meeting," I said, "and you weren't invited." The air shifted. Matthew straightened. "Mom, let's not do this. We just want to talk." "You've been talking for months," I replied. "I've been listening." Claire crossed her arms. "Then why are you acting like this?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the living room and gestured toward the coffee table. "There's someone I want you to meet." That's when they noticed Samuel Porter. He was seated calmly, briefcase open, documents neatly arranged. He didn't stand. He didn't rush. He simply looked up and nodded once. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Samuel Porter." Claire froze. Matthew's jaw tightened. Lydia inhaled sharply. "What is this?" Claire demanded. "This," Samuel said evenly, "is a conversation you've been assuming would never happen." I took a seat across from them. Matthew spoke first. "Why is there an attorney here?" "Because," I said, "you told me to handle things myself." Claire laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "That was months ago. Don't be dramatic." Samuel slid a folder forward. "Your mother wasn't." Silence fell. Samuel continued. "At her request, I revised her estate documents earlier this year. Everything was done legally, deliberately, and with full capacity assessments." Claire's face drained of color. "Revised how?" "Significantly," he replied. Matthew leaned forward. "You can't just change things without telling us." "I can," I said quietly, "and I did." Lydia finally spoke. "Mom, what did you change?" I looked at her, then really looked. "You never asked me how I was doing," I said. "Not once, but now you're asking this." Samuel opened another folder. "The lake house," he said, "has been reassigned." Claire stood abruptly. "To whom?" "To Alina Morales," Samuel replied. The room went still. "That's ridiculous," Claire snapped. "She's not even your child." "No," I said, "she's simply someone who showed up." Matthew shook his head. "You're punishing us." "No," I replied. "I'm choosing." Lydia whispered. "Is there anything left for us?" Samuel answered before I could. "Yes, each of you has been left a symbolic sum." Claire laughed bitterly. "Symbolic, $1,000 each," he said. "Enough to acknowledge you were not forgotten." The explosion came fast. Claire accused. Matthew argued. Lydia cried quietly. "You're destroying this family," Claire said. I shook my head slowly. "You stopped being my family when you decided my silence meant consent." Samuel closed his folder. "This meeting is over," he said. "Any further communication will go through my office." They left shortly after. No hugs. No reconciliation, no apology, just shock. As the door closed behind them, the house felt different. Not emptier, lighter. I stood alone by the window, watching their cars disappear down the road. For the first time since Edward passed, I felt something close to peace. But I also knew this wasn't the end. It was only the moment they realized the story was no longer theirs to control. The quiet after they left was unfamiliar. Not the hollow quiet that follows an argument, not the sharp quiet of regret. This one settled gently. I stood in the doorway of the lake house for a long time after Claire, Matthew, and Lydia drove away. The dust they stirred on the gravel road hung briefly in the air before drifting back down, undisturbed. It felt symbolic. I closed the door, turned the lock, and rested my forehead against the cool wood. Only then did my hands begin to shake, not from fear, from release. I walked into the living room where Samuel Porter was carefully repacking his briefcase. You handled that well, he said without looking up. I didn't feel strong, I replied. That's usually how real strength feels, he said. I sat down slowly, suddenly aware of how tired my body was. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from movement but from holding yourself together for too long. They'll escalate, I said. Samuel nodded. Yes. Claire won't accept this quietly. No, he agreed. She's used to control. Matthew will disappear until it's useful to reappear, I thought. And Lydia would wait, hoping someone else would fix it for her. What happens now? I asked. Now, Samuel said, clicking the briefcase shut, we prepare. He laid out the next steps calmly: documentation, security, boundaries. He spoke with the ease of a man who had walked this path with others before. They may try to question your capacity, he said. It's common. I smiled faintly. They've been doing that informally for years. Samuel met my eyes. This time it won't work. After he left, I spent the rest of the afternoon alone. I didn't read. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't call anyone. I walked through the lake house slowly, touching the walls, the shelves, the windows Edward had repaired himself. Memories surfaced uninvited. Claire at 12 correcting her teachers. Matthew at 16 negotiating chores like contracts. Lydia at 9 watching quietly from corners. Edward had noticed it too. They love you, he once said carefully, but they don't always see you. I hadn't wanted to hear that then. That night I slept better than I had in months. The first call came 2 days later. I didn't answer it, then another, and another. By the third day, the messages started, from Claire, long, structured, legal sounding. She questioned my judgment. She expressed concern. She suggested mediation. She implied regret, but never responsibility. Matthew sent one message. Just one. We don't need to do this the hard way. I forwarded it to Samuel without replying. Lydia sent nothing. A week passed. Then Alina Morales called. I heard from Claire, she said hesitantly. She was upset? I imagine she was, I replied. I told her I didn't ask for anything, Alina said quickly, that this was your decision. I know, I said, that's why I trust you. There was a pause. Victoria, she said softly, are you okay? That question landed harder than anything else that week. Yes, I said after a moment. I think I finally am. She visited the following weekend. No agenda, no expectations. Just groceries, laughter, and quiet company. Watching her move through the house, careful and respectful, I felt a strange mix of grief and gratitude. This was what care looked like when it wasn't transactional. The escalation came exactly when Samuel predicted. A letter, certified from Claire's attorney. She was formally requesting a competency evaluation. Samuel smiled when I handed it to him. Right on schedule, he said. The evaluation was thorough, lengthy, humiliating in small, subtle ways, but I answered every question calmly: dates, finances, logic puzzles, ethical reasoning. When the psychologist finished, she smiled warmly. Mrs. Hale, she said, you are one of the clearest, most grounded individuals I've assessed this year. The report shut the door Claire hoped to open. She pivoted tactics: public sympathy, concerned messages to extended family. Carefully worded posts that implied I was confused, grieving, unstable. Samuel countered each one with restraint. Facts over emotion, documentation over accusation. Matthew vanished completely. Lydia sent a single email. I don't want to fight, I just wish things were different. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Because wishing without action is just another way of avoiding responsibility. One evening, sitting alone on the porch, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't waiting for them to come back, not really. I was mourning the version of them I thought existed. Edward had been right, they loved me. But they never truly saw me, and for the first time I stopped trying to make myself smaller so they could. The lake reflected the sunset in quiet ripples. I breathed deeply. This wasn't loneliness. This was space. And in that space, something new was beginning to take shape, but before it could fully form, the next move came. And this time, it wasn't from my children. The call came on a Tuesday morning, not from Claire, not from Matthew. Not even from Lydia. It was from someone I hadn't expected to hear from at all. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me to answer it. Mrs. Hale, a woman asked carefully. My name is Karen Whitfield. I work with a financial oversight firm in Hartford. My grip tightened around the phone. Yes, I said. How can I help you? There's been a request submitted involving your assets, she continued. Specifically, a request to review historical transfers and access attempts made under your name. I didn't interrupt. She hesitated. I wanted to speak with you directly before this went any further. That sentence told me everything. Who submitted the request? I asked. There was a pause. Your daughter, Claire Reynolds. Of course. Karen explained that Claire had attempted to access archived records tied to accounts Edward and I had closed years earlier. Accounts that no longer existed but still left footprints. She indicated concern that funds may have been mismanaged while you were grieving, Karen said carefully, but the request was aggressive. Aggressive was Claire's preferred method. I haven't authorized any review, I said. I know, Karen replied. That's why I'm calling. After we hung up, I sat very still. This wasn't about concern, this was about leverage. Claire wasn't trying to reconcile. She was trying to regain control by any means that might work. I called Samuel Porter immediately. She's fishing, he said after I explained. And she's frustrated. Can she do this? I asked. She can try, he replied. But she won't like what she finds. Edward always believed in preparation over confrontation, and Samuel had helped us build a paper trail that didn't panic, it protected. Do nothing, Samuel added. Let me handle it. For once in my life, I listened. 2 days later, Samuel called back. She's backed off, he said. That fast? She wasn't expecting resistance, he replied. And she definitely wasn't expecting transparency. I exhaled slowly, but the tension didn't leave, it shifted. Matthew resurfaced that same evening, a voicemail. His voice sounded measured, too measured. Mom, he said, we need to talk. Not through lawyers, not through letters, just talk. I didn't call him back. Instead, I listened to the message again. There was no apology, no accountability, just discomfort. Lydia finally reached out the following week. She showed up unannounced, standing at my door, hands folded, eyes cautious. I didn't know how to say anything sooner, she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch like a guest, not a daughter. I don't agree with how Claire handled things, she began, but I also don't want to lose my family. I studied her face. You didn't lose me, I said. You chose silence. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't think it would get this bad. It didn't get bad suddenly, I replied gently. It got bad slowly, you just didn't want to look. She nodded but said nothing. I'm not asking you to pick sides, I continued. I'm asking you to recognize what happened. She whispered, I don't know how. That honesty mattered, but it wasn't enough to undo years of avoidance. I need distance right now, I said calmly. That doesn't mean forever. It means honest space. She left quietly, and I let her. That night I walked through my house and noticed something strange. I wasn't bracing myself. No anticipation of the next demand. No rehearsed explanations in my head. Just quiet. Alina Morales came by the next weekend again. We sat at the kitchen table, tea between us. You look lighter, she said. I feel steadier, I replied. She smiled. That's different. It is, I agreed. She hesitated. They're angry, I know. Do you regret it? The question hung in the air. I thought of Edward, of his steady hands, his careful planning, his quiet belief that love didn't mean surrender. No, I said finally. I regret waiting so long. Weeks passed. The legal noise softened. Claire redirected her energy elsewhere. Matthew stayed distant. Lydia sent the occasional neutral message, and I discovered something unexpected. Without constantly managing their emotions, I had space for my own. I started volunteering again, reconnecting with neighbors, taking walks without my phone clenched in my hand. One afternoon, while sorting old paperwork, I found a note Edward had tucked into a file folder years ago. In his handwriting, if you're reading this, it means you're finally choosing yourself. I knew you would, eventually. I pressed the paper to my chest and laughed through tears. He had known. He had trusted that I would learn, and I had. But the calm didn't last forever, because just when I believed the worst had passed, Samuel called again. Victoria, he said, his voice calm but firm, we have a development. My heart stilled. What kind? Claire has filed a formal petition, he said. Not against your competency. I closed my eyes. Against the will? And this time she wasn't alone. The petition arrived by certified mail, thick, heavy, official. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the dining table and made tea, the way I used to when Edward brought home difficult news from work. He always said panic made decisions sloppy. When I finally slit the envelope, the words confirmed what Samuel Porter had warned me about. Claire Reynolds, joined by Matthew Hale, was formally contesting the will. Not on grounds of incompetence, on grounds of undue influence. They were claiming someone had manipulated me. I didn't need to guess who they meant. "Elena," I murmured softly, staring at the page. Samuel arrived that afternoon. He read the petition slowly, his expression never changing. "They're asserting that Elena Morales influenced you emotionally during a vulnerable period," he said. "That she positioned herself to benefit indirectly." "I didn't leave her anything," I said. "Doesn't matter," Samuel replied. "They're framing her as leverage. If they discredit her presence, they weaken your resolve." It was calculated, cold, and unmistakably Claire. "They're also claiming Matthew was excluded unfairly," Samuel added. "He signed the petition yesterday." That hurt more than I expected. Matthew had always hidden behind logic. Behind phrases like "this is just how things work." But this was a choice. "What happens now?" I asked. Samuel folded his hands. "Now we prepare." The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks of quiet pressure, 6 weeks of waiting. Claire didn't call, she sent statements. Emails written like press releases. Concerned, controlled, carefully worded, "We're worried about Mom. This isn't about money, we just want transparency." Matthew sent nothing. Lydia sent a message. "I didn't sign anything. I swear I believed her." But belief didn't undo damage. The hardest conversation was with Elena. She sat across from me, eyes wide as I explained. "They're saying I influenced you?" she asked softly. "Yes," she shook her head. "I never asked for anything." "I know," her hands trembled slightly. "I don't want to cause trouble in your family." "You didn't," I said firmly. "You showed up. That's not manipulation, that's humanity." But guilt is a powerful weapon. And Claire knew exactly how to use it. The weeks that followed were exhausting. Depositions, affidavits, endless documentation. Samuel handled everything with precision, but the emotional toll was mine alone. I found myself replaying moments, every conversation, every decision, every time I'd chosen silence over confrontation. At night I dreamed of Edward. He never spoke, he just watched. The way he always did, quietly waiting for me to catch up. One afternoon, Samuel called me into his office. "We need to address something directly," he said. "What?" "They're going to paint you as passive," he explained. "As someone who was led rather than decided." I straightened. "I wasn't led." "I know," he replied, "but we need to show it." He slid a document toward me. It was a timeline, every decision, every revision, every consultation dated. Signed, verified. "You were methodical," Samuel said. "This wasn't impulsive, this was deliberate." For the first time since the petition arrived, I felt something shift. Confidence. The hearing arrived sooner than I expected. Claire sat on one side of the room, immaculate as ever. Matthew beside her, jaw tight. Lydia sat alone, eyes fixed on the floor. Elena wasn't there. I hadn't asked her to come. I wouldn't let her be used as a spectacle. The judge listened. Samuel spoke calmly, presenting facts without drama. Claire's attorney spoke passionately, about grief, about vulnerability, about concern. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "do you understand the implications of your estate decisions?" "Yes," I replied. "Did anyone pressure you to make them?" "No." "Did anyone benefit unfairly?" "No." Claire's attorney leaned forward. "Mrs. Hale, were you lonely when you made these changes?" I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said, "but loneliness doesn't mean incompetence." The room went quiet. "Were you grieving?" "Yes." "Were you confused?" "No." I looked directly at Claire. "I was clear." The judge nodded slowly. After a brief recess, he returned. "The petition is dismissed," he said. "There is no evidence of undue influence. The will stands." Claire's face didn't move. Matthew exhaled sharply. Lydia covered her mouth. It was over, legally, but not emotionally. Outside the courtroom, Claire finally spoke. "You didn't have to humiliate us," she said. I met her gaze. "You humiliated yourselves when you treated me like an asset instead of a mother." Matthew didn't speak. He just walked away. Lydia hesitated. "I didn't know how to stop it," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But knowing and doing are different things." She nodded slowly. That evening I went home alone. The house felt peaceful, not empty, peaceful. I poured a glass of water and sat at the table where this had all begun. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next blow. Because the hardest part wasn't the legal battle. It was accepting this truth. I hadn't lost my family in that courtroom. I had lost them long before when they stopped seeing me as a person. And in choosing myself, I hadn't become cruel. I had become free. But freedom, I was about to learn, comes with one final test. And it would arrive from the last place I expected. The call came 3 days after the hearing. I didn't recognize the number at first. When I answered, there was silence on the line, then a breath. Mom, Matthew. It was the first time he'd said the word in months. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence do what it needed to do. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, he continued. But I thought after everything I should call. You thought wrong before, I said calmly. So tell me why you're thinking differently now. Another pause. I didn't expect the judge to dismiss it so fast, he admitted. Claire said she said we had a strong case. Of course she did. Claire always believed preparation could replace truth. And how do you feel now? I asked. I feel exposed, Matthew said quietly, like I miscalculated. There it was, not regret, not remorse, calculation. I didn't do this to teach you a lesson, I said. I did it because I was done being managed. I know, he replied quickly. And I respect that, but maybe we can talk about adjusting things now that emotions have cooled. I almost laughed, almost. You want to renegotiate, I said, after trying to override my decisions? I just think we all reacted badly, he said. No one's perfect. No, I agreed. But patterns matter, he sighed. Claire is furious. She says you chose a niece over your own children. I didn't raise my voice. I chose presence over entitlement, I said. That's not betrayal. Well, Matthew said carefully, she's talking about cutting ties. I closed my eyes. Then she's doing what she should have done years ago, I said. Being honest, he didn't answer. I hope you find peace, I added, but I won't be adjusting anything. The call ended without drama, just finality. Later that afternoon, Samuel Porter stopped by with paperwork. Everything is finalized, he said. No further appeals, legally you're clear. And emotionally, I asked. He gave a small smile. That part takes longer. He wasn't wrong. That evening, Lydia Hale came by unannounced. She stood at the doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside. I won't stay long, she said. I just needed to see you. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly. I didn't sign the petition, she said again. I swear. I know, but I didn't stop it either, she whispered. That's the harder truth, I replied gently. She swallowed. Claire says you've changed. I have, I said. I stopped disappearing. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know how to be on your side without losing them, she admitted. I nodded slowly. And now you know the cost of not choosing? She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her bag and handed me something. A photo. It was old, creased at the corners. Edward and me standing by the lake years ago. I found it in Claire's storage, Lydia said. She was throwing things out. I felt something tighten in my chest. She said it didn't matter anymore, Lydia added quietly. I stared at the photo for a long time. Edward's arm was around my shoulders. We were smiling, not posing, just there. I'll keep this, I said. Lydia nodded. I don't know what happens now, she said. But I want to be honest, even if it costs me. That's a beginning, I said. She left shortly after. The house felt quieter but not lonelier. A different quiet. The kind that comes after noise stops. That weekend, Alina Morales came over with groceries. She didn't ask questions. She never did. She just filled the fridge and made tea. I heard the petition was dismissed, she said gently. Yes, she smiled softly. I never doubted you. I studied her face. You never tried to steer me, I said. She shrugged. You didn't need steering? That night I sat alone and reviewed the last remaining document. A letter, one Samuel had suggested but never pressured. A personal addendum to my estate file, not legally required, not enforceable. Just words my children might one day read. I stared at the blank page for a long time. Then I began to write, not accusations, not explanations, truth. I wrote about love, about silence. About how being needed feels different from being wanted. About how Edward used to say, if people only call when they want something, listen to the silence in between. I wrote until my hand ached. When I finished, I felt lighter. As if I had finally said what had been waiting for years, I sealed the letter. Samuel would store it with the rest. Whether they read it someday or never was no longer my burden because something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for apologies, not for recognition, not for permission. And just when I thought the story had reached its quiet end, the doorbell rang. Unexpected, sharp, insistent. I opened the door. And standing there, eyes red, posture rigid, was Claire Reynolds. She looked past me into the house. "You really did it," she said. "You chose this over us." I met her gaze steadily. "No," I replied. "I chose myself." Her jaw tightened. "Then we're done," she said. I nodded once. "Yes," I said calmly, "we are." She turned and walked away, and as I closed the door, something inside me settled completely. Not victory, not bitterness, resolution. But what I didn't yet know was that closure would come from one final place, one moment that would rewrite everything I thought this ending meant. And it was already on its way. The lake was still that morning. Not the kind of stillness that feels empty, but the kind that feels decided. I stood on the porch with a cup of tea, watching sunlight spread slowly across the water the way it always had. Edward used to say the lake never rushed, that it waited for people to catch up to themselves. It took me 71 years to understand what he meant. The day before, Samuel Porter had called to confirm what I already knew. "There's nothing more pending," he said. "No filings. No objections, no leverage left." "Thank you," I replied, "for all of it." He paused before hanging up. "You know," he said, "most people don't reach this point because they're brave, they reach it because they're tired." I smiled. "Yes," I said, "that's exactly right." After the call, I drove to the lake house alone, not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to see it one last time before it became something new, not sold, not transferred, just redefined. Inside, everything looked the same. The old clock on the mantel, the shelves Edward built with his own hands, the dining table where voices once overlapped, where laughter used to feel easy before it became measured. I didn't cry, grief had already done its work. Instead, I opened drawers, sorted papers, labeled boxes. I left nothing unclear. By noon, Alina Morales arrived. She didn't bring questions, she brought lunch. "You didn't have to come," I told her. "I wanted to," she replied simply. We ate by the window, watching a pair of ducks drift across the water. "She would have loved this," Alina said quietly. I nodded. "Your mother was gentle," I said. "But she was never invisible." Alina smiled sadly. "She always said you taught her that." That afternoon, I handed her the folder. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. "I trust you," she said. The words landed differently than they ever had before. Because this time, they weren't leverage. They weren't expectation. They weren't entitlement. They were simply true. When she left, I locked the door and placed the keys in the envelope Samuel had prepared. Not to hand over, just to file, because the house didn't belong to urgency anymore. It belonged to care. The following week, the letters arrived. One from Claire Reynolds. It was short, formal, legal in tone. She acknowledged the finality. Stated she would not pursue further contact. Wished me well. I read it once. Then placed it in the folder with the others, not as a wound. As a record, Matthew Hale never wrote, but he did call Samuel, asked questions, explored options. Found none and finally stopped asking. Lydia Hale sent a message, not asking, not defending, just saying she understood now, that she was sorry for her silence. I didn't reply immediately. When I did, it was one sentence. "I hope you choose differently when it matters next time." That was enough. Weeks passed, then months. The quiet stayed, but it no longer felt heavy. I rearranged the living room, donated things I no longer needed. Took walks without checking my phone. People stopped treating my absence as temporary. They adjusted. So did I. One morning, Samuel came by with a final document. "This is optional," he said. "But I recommend it." It was a directive, not about money, about boundaries. Who could speak for me, who could not, who would be contacted, who would not. I signed it without hesitation. "This isn't bitterness," I said. "No," Samuel agreed, "it's authorship." That evening, I sat down and reread Edward's old notes. The ones he used to tuck into drawers, little reminders, dates, thoughts. One line caught my eye. "People don't change when you explain. They change when access changes." He had known, maybe before I did. The last call came unexpectedly, a number I almost didn't answer. But I did. It was Matthew. His voice sounded different, not defensive, just tired. I won't ask for anything, he said quickly. I just wanted to say I get it now. I waited. I thought being busy meant being important, he continued. I thought you'd always be there no matter how little we gave back. I said nothing. That was wrong, he said. I don't know if it's fixable, but I wanted you to know I see it. I took a breath. Seeing it doesn't undo it, I said gently, but it does change what you do next. I understand, he replied. We ended the call quietly. No reconciliation, no promises, just clarity, and that was enough. On the first anniversary of Edward's passing, I went back to the lake alone, sat on the dock, let my feet touch the water. I spoke to him out loud, not in grief, in gratitude. I finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine, I told him. The water moved gently around the dock, like it was listening. I didn't lose my family all at once. I lost them slowly each time they chose convenience over care, and I didn't punish them. I simply stopped rearranging my life to be tolerated. They told me to handle my problems alone, so I did. I handled them quietly, legally, irreversibly, and in doing so, I didn't take anything from them. I reclaimed myself. If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. And if you believe quiet strength matters, consider subscribing. More stories like this are waiting. Some endings are loud, but the most permanent ones, they arrive without a sound.